this video that popped up from Asian Boss, because I remember we talked about a video specifically, what, last year or the year before that, where basically like the US version of 7-Eleven wants to copy Japan 7-Eleven, but then here's a video like 2 months ago that explains like why the US can't copy Japanese 7-Eleven. I feel like, okay, there could be multiple things. Number one is like the freshness of like Japanese foods is completely different compared to the US. Number two, there's like a lot of like Americans or so that just want like the American thing and don't want the 7-Elevens to be, I guess, Japaneseified, I guess. You know? I think number three, it probably the problem is it would only be in a few selected 7-Eleven stores instead of all of them, you know? They don't sell tentacle in the US? Okay, I don't know, but I'm not talking about that though. Ultimately, it's because the US isn't a high trust society. That's what I was saying. I was like, that would be like my third thing or so, is like it'd be lazy, and I would assume like most of them, like I said, it would be like in most selected stores, because I don't think it would be in all stores, because I would assume like in the more ghetto area it would cause more problems for them to, and they would probably get stolen too. I'd be curious to see what are the like multiple reasons.
If you ever visited Japan, chances are you've noticed and walked into a 7-Eleven at least once. Because it's a brand you instantly recognize, you go in expecting the usual stuff: snacks, drinks, something quick to grab and head out. But a few minutes later, you start noticing something and you get confused. They're selling all kinds of food you've never seen in American 7-Elevens. And somehow it tastes better than
we get a lot of this in one of my local konbini store.
what you would normally get at a lot of restaurants. And then the obvious question hits you. Isn't 7-Eleven supposed to be an American company? So why does the Japanese 7-Eleven feel so much better than the American version? That confusion seems almost universal and viral worthy. On YouTube and TikTok, you can find creators from all over the world filming themselves inside Japanese 7-Elevens, trying the famous egg salad sandwich.
I guess I might be the odd one out or so. I might be the only one who like doesn't see it very much of a surprise or so, for me specifically. I don't know. Maybe that's just me or so. Maybe I don't really see it that much of a surprise when it comes to like the weird random cool stuff that you see at the konbini store anyways. I don't know, maybe because ours is just a little bit more different, I guess, you know?
Bento boxes and Japanese style breads. And those videos pull in millions of views. Here is what I found interesting. Everyone just talks about how amazing the food is, but no one really seems to be asking about how Japanese 7-Eleven ended up becoming this way in the first place.
Well, it's because
that question appears to be pretty important right now,
healthy.
Because by many measures, American 7-Eleven has been under real pressure. After a failed mega merger attempt, store closures, and uneven growth, the company's own leaders have been talking openly about needing a turnaround and trying to become more like Japanese 7-Eleven, even as they prepare to spin off the US business in an IPO. But is that really something you can even copy? When we did our research, we discovered that there were—
I feel like you can, but only to a degree and only to a few stores though. I feel like that's the only way to do it. Like you have to hit like in certain areas where it's popular for the whole Japanese aesthetic thing or so to work, instead of it being like every single 7-Eleven.
many different forces that came together to transform Japanese 7-Eleven into what it is today. A convenience store model that set the bar so high that other countries and even local competitors are left wondering how they could ever catch up. Some of what we found might surprise you, so watch until the very end and decide for yourself whether the Japanese version of 7-Eleven can easily be replicated, not just in the US, but in your own country as well, wherever you're watching this from. To understand how they got here though, we have to go back to the beginning, to the very first Japanese 7-Eleven, and the moment when a simple licensing deal accidentally created a completely different future for the brand. Before we deep dive, we often get asked how we are able to do such deep research across so many Asian countries. A big part of it is that we spent a lot of time digging into local context. Cultural differences between the West and East are huge, but so are the information gaps within Asia itself, driven by language barriers and algorithms tailored to different countries. That's why we use CyberGhost VPN as one of our research tools.
Wow, it's
CyberGhost
a VPN?
encrypts 100%
That's
of your
crazy,
internet
chat.
traffic
I heard
and
they're banning
reroutes it through a
VPNs.
secure.
Anyways. The Rise of the Japanese 7-Eleven Chapter 1.
Picture this. It's Tokyo in the early 1970s. The economy is booming, salarymen are working late, but if you miss supermarket hours, your options are basically vending machines, tiny liquor stores, or nothing at all. There's no such a thing yet as what Japan would later call a konbini, a true 24-hour convenience store network on every corner. Meanwhile, in the US, the story begins decades earlier. In 1927, there was a company in Dallas, Texas called Southland Ice Company. Back then, most American households didn't have fridges, so that was the company's entire business model, selling ice. But soon, the company noticed something simple but important. If customers were already coming by to buy ice, why not sell them a few basic groceries as well? Milk, bread, eggs, everyday essentials. As more of Southland's ice stocks started doing this, they gradually evolved into a chain of small retail outlets. Around 1928, these grocery-selling outlets were given their own name, totem stores, basically places where you could tote or carry your daily necessities home. Then in 1946, the totem stores were rebranded as 7-Eleven to reflect their new operating hours concept, 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., 7 days per week. I'll be honest, I didn't realize that 7-Eleven was literally named after its operating hours. But kinda obvious if you think about it. And if you didn't know, well, now you do. At the time, those extended hours were considered revolutionary compared to typical store hours, which usually close around 5:30 or 6 p.m. From there, the model kept evolving, eventually moving towards 24-hour operations in the early 1960s, starting with a store in Austin, Texas, that stayed open all night in 1963 and proved so successful that the around-the-clock format spread across the chain. By then, many 7-Elevens were selling coffee, snacks, cigarettes, and everyday essentials 24/7, all built around a car-driven American lifestyle. So when a Japanese retail executive named Masatoshi Ito, who ran a fast-growing supermarket chain called Ito Yokado, visited the United States in the early 1970s and saw the 7-Eleven model firsthand, he was struck by how different it felt from traditional Japanese retail. To him, it revealed a huge gap back home and a major opportunity. In 1973, Ito Yokado...
You know what I always thought, or so it's so cool to see, like how Americans go to Japan and they see really cool things and be like, whoa, that's crazy. But then it's also pretty cool to see the Japanese businessmen or Japanese people in general come over to the Western side and they're like, whoa, suge, It's pretty cool to see that,
signed a licensing and area franchise agreement with the Southland Corporation, the U.S. owner of 7-Eleven, and in November that year, created a dedicated subsidiary called York 7 Co. Limited. The deal gave York 7, which would later be renamed 7-Eleven Japan, the exclusive right to develop and operate 7-Eleven stores in Japan.
That's actually
They could use the 7-Eleven name and trademarks and tap into the company's operating know-how in exchange for franchise fees and compliance with the American-sized basic brand and operational standards. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Inside the new subsidiary, 7-Eleven Japan, there was a relatively young manager named Toshifumi Suzuki, who was put in charge of the whole 7-Eleven project. No one knew it at the time, but he would go on to become the first president of 7-Eleven Japan and later chairman and CEO of the whole Ito Yokado group, which would eventually be renamed as 7&I Holdings, with the I coming from Ito Yokado. More on this a bit later because the company structure becomes really interesting. Anyway, Suzuki is often described in Japanese media as the godfather of the konbini. Turns out, Toshifumi Suzuki was the one that convinced Ito Yokado to pursue the licensing deal, negotiated directly with the American side, and then became the first president of 7-Eleven Japan when the subsidiary was created. Under his leadership, The company introduced the franchise model into Japanese convenience retail and began building a radically different operating system behind the scenes, one that would eventually turn Japanese 7-Eleven into a business more profitable and mired than the original American chain. From the American side, this was basically, okay, here's the brand, here's the basic playbook, go open some stores in Japan. But from the Japanese side, it became, let's completely re-engineer how this business works for dense cities, small homes, and insanely demanding customers. On May 15th, 1974, the first Japanese 7-Eleven opened in Tokyo, run by a 24-year-old former liquor store owner who converted his family store into a franchise 7-Eleven. So it was technically a franchise from day one.
Also a Yakuza.
The Japan headquarters supplied the brand, systems, and logistics, while the store owner, the franchisee, ran the shop on a revenue-sharing basis. We can get into how the franchise agreement itself differs in Japan from the American model a bit later, but it's not an exaggeration to say that 7-Eleven stores exploded across Japan. And they didn't spread randomly, they spread in clusters. Instead of building big, expensive new stores from scratch everywhere, 7-Eleven Japan mostly converted existing neighborhood shops into franchised 7-Elevens. A lot of them were small, family-run liquor stores and general shops on good locations that were already part of the community. Headquarters brought the brand, the store layout, and the supply network. The local owner brought the
So, you know, the craziest thing about it is that instead of like building one building in that specific area and run the family business out of business or so, because the family business cannot compete, they decided to work with the family businesses in that specific area and then convert it into their 7-Eleven ecosystem. That's rather interesting. It's very different or so compared to like the Western side of society, where they usually build like a big chain or so, builds one in this specific area, and then usually runs out of business for the other smaller stores within the area itself, and it just kind of like ruins them specifically because they have to close down shop because they can't compete with the big corporation. But this is completely different. That's actually pretty interesting to hear that.
And the right to use the site, whether they owned the land outright or leased it, plus their knowledge of the neighborhood. For many struggling shop owners, turning into a 7-Eleven was basically a lifeline. That's one of the big reasons 7-Eleven Japan could scale so quickly. They didn't have to gamble on totally new sites. They were upgrading corners that already had foot traffic, then surrounding them with more stores in the same area, so deliveries, promotions, and brand awareness all became more efficient. By 1980, just 6 years after that first Tokyo store opened, 7-Eleven Japan already had over 1,000 stores nationwide. By 1983, they had more than 2,000. And by then, 7-Eleven was well on its way to becoming a household name in Japan. And of course, with that kind of success comes competition. Lawson entered the Japanese market in the mid-1970s, opening its first convenience store in Osaka Prefecture in 1975, only about a year after 7-Eleven's debut. Family Mart grew out of the Seiyu supermarket group in the late 1970s and began rolling out its own franchise-based convenience model in the early 1980s, quickly expanding in both urban and suburban areas. So by the mid-1980s, you already had 3 major players racing to grab the best street corners and insert themselves into people's daily routines. Breakfast on the way to the train, lunch near the office, late-night snacks on the way home. And among those 3, 7-Eleven was leading in both store count and sales per store. From there, the numbers just kept climbing. 7-Eleven Japan passed 10,000 domestic stores in 2003. Today, there are over 21,000 7-Eleven stores in Japan alone.
That's what we call
almost a quarter of all 7-Eleven stores in the world. Remember Ito Yokado, the parent company that brought the 7-Eleven brand to Japan, and also one of the biggest supermarket chains in the country? Ito Yokado was supposed to be the main business, with 7-Eleven Japan just a new experiment in convenience retail sitting underneath it. But it was increasingly becoming obvious where the real growth and profits were actually coming from. The convenience retail market was killing it. Meanwhile, back in the United States, the original parent company of American 7-Eleven, Southland Corporation, had run into serious trouble. After aggressive expansion and mounting debt, Southland filed for bankruptcy in 1987.
Whoa,
To keep the
really?
company afloat, Ito-Yokado and 7-Eleven Japan stepped in as part of the restructuring. And by 1991, the Japanese side controlled roughly 70% of the American 7-Eleven business.
Oh, wow.
Fast forward to 2005.
So technically, they are so since they filed for bankruptcy and now they own 70% of the company itself. That means now 7-Eleven is completely like what is Japanese owned, right?
7-Eleven Japan had become the group's clear growth engine. Ito-Yokado reorganized itself into a holding company called 7&I Holdings, placing 7-Eleven Japan, Ito-Yokado Supermarkets, and Denny's Japan under one umbrella. Oh yeah,
Denny's?
Ito-Yokado, or more specifically, Toshifumi Suzuki, the godfather of the konbini and the CEO of 7-Eleven Japan, had also been responsible for bringing Denny's to Japan in the early 19th.
What the fuck? Are you serious? Oh my god, dude, man, this guy. I kind of want to see how a Japanese Denny's is like. Actually, that piques my curiosity.
70s,
I want to see the
around
menu
same
on that
period,
one.
He pushed to bring in 7-Eleven. Here's the ironic
That's
part.
cool.
Around the same time in 2005, as 7&I Holdings was being formed in Japan, the group also increased its stake in the US business, by then already renamed from Southland Corporation to 7-Eleven Inc., from 70% to 100%.
Oh shit.
In
what
other
the
words,
fuck?
they went from majority owner to full owner.
Yeah, to full ownership.
That move made the American 7-Eleven company a wholly owned subsidiary of the Japanese
Wait,
group.
so this happened in 2005 that they own fully 7-Eleven? Oh, that's interesting. But my curiosity is how come they never like bothered trying to like change it in 2005, you know? Like that's like my curiosity. Like how come they never like experimented, you know? Like how they did in it probably must have been like too early or so before what, the Japanese boom craze, right? I'm wondering if they can even do it. Well, I don't think they can, but I think they can only do it to some degree. But the problem is it's such a different playing field when it comes to the 7-Eleven in the western side compared to the one in Japan.
Under the 7&I Holdings umbrella. So the licensee in Japan that originally just borrowed the American brand eventually became the global parent of the original American
and they became
chain.
the full ownership.
The fact that the
That's
whole
crazy.
7-Eleven brand is now effectively owned and controlled by a Japanese conglomerate rather than a US company is
That is
something I had
wild
no
to
idea
see
about until I
that.
looked it up. But suddenly, it feels a lot more credible when you hear the American 7-Eleven saying that they want to be more like the Japanese 7-Eleven. On paper, they might actually be able to pull it off because the Japanese side is literally calling the shots at the corporate level. But the real question is, can they really copy the Japanese model in the US, or are there deeper structural and maybe cultural forces that just cannot be replicated? Let's take a closer.
I'm trying to think, right? Because like I said, I've never been to Japan itself, right? To take a look at the 7-Eleven version, right? But I've seen videos in like konbini stores, and then I'm comparing it to at least one of my local konbini stores, because it's more Japan-esque than some of the other ones. I really don't think it's possible. From the matter of like looking or so, right? Especially like importing certain things, and because like you can buy food, like I can buy food at my konbini store, like fresh food made on that specific day. Well, I don't think your typical American worker is gonna start making onigiris every single day, or like make the sandwiches, or like, you know, I don't think it'd be possible. I don't think so.
Also look. Okay, so let's just list out what makes the Japanese 7-Eleven so much better than the American 7-Eleven. First of all, the food is amazing. Shelves are constantly stocked with fresh bentos, sandwiches, onigiri rice balls, and salads delivered several times a day.
Yeah,
Many
this will never happen. This can never happen in America. No, sorry, this can never happen. Now it's very difficult to try to make a change class of culture and doing things. Japan benefits geology because in Japan, 7-Eleven is near you. In the U.S., the 7-Eleven might be far away from you. That is, yeah, actually, you might be right. Actually, because like a lot of the stuff that makes it so like accessible is because it's like literally like down the street. I feel like this specific like tough stuff like this can work a lot more better in like the Hispanic region, like in well, to my knowledge, well, basically anything beyond Mexico and downwards. But I'm mostly focusing more on Mexico and El Salvador, because El Salvador has like, you know, like they said, they have like in Japan they have mom and pop shops that have like convenience stores, right? Like kind of like their own mini convenience store. It's the same thing in like in El Salvador and Mexico, right? It's like literally right down the street, right around the corner, or not even that far away, you know? You can go like to these like specific stores and you can buy bread, you can buy chips, you can buy a soda, sometimes you can buy food, you know, and it's always made fresh on that specific day. That's what makes it the huge difference, you know. And then compared to when I visited to America, where everything is so far away, you know, everything is like far away from one another. That's the reason why. It's just kind of like I personally hated it the most compared to how it is like in El Salvador and Mexico, where it's like, oh, I'm just gonna go down to the store right now. So like even like the pharmacy too is like, it's like not even that far away either, because like a pharmacy is like super close by, you know. Like even in the pueblo that my grandma used to be, you know, we had like a restaurant down the street. We had a place that made fresh dulce de pan, bolillo, and then like if you go more down the road from the restaurant, there is like a couple of stores that are owned by families that are combini stores that you can order stuff. There's an arcade place too right behind the restaurant. There's a playground area. I'm like, it's all like relatively close, and it's a pueblo. It's a village, right? It's a pueblo, but it's like it's a pretty decent sized pueblo where it has all this stuff like nearby. So I feel like this formula can work over there a lot more better compared to like America, unless they find a way to reshuffle to get it like closer into like the neighborhood, you know? That's the only way.
of them made locally and replaced within hours rather than days. The egg sandwich in particular is famous for its crustless, soft white bread and silky egg salad made with Japanese Kewpie mayo. It's 7-Eleven's perfected take on tamago sando, a simple egg sandwich that became a post-World War II comfort food in Japan long before it ever went viral globally. And what sets the 7-Eleven version apart is how consistently fresh and soft they managed to keep it, which I'll get into in a bit later. The stores themselves
and you can't really do that with America because there's a lot of preservatives in American stuff, you know. Even let's say they try to copy the JP style of operating, the food they offer will be totally different. You might see some Japanese food, but most of the food they have offer gotta be suited for the US. It can, but the problem is like a lot of the food from like it has to be different. Like it's gonna have preservatives in it, unfortunately. You know, compared to JP, where JP has their food that's made fresh and usually made on that specific day, and then they come in and change, they stock it up with fresh food and everything like that. I just don't think it'll work. It'll work for America because they just add too much shit in their food. You know, too many chemicals for preservatives and shit.
Are bright, super clean, and perfectly organized. But what really defines Japan's 7-Eleven is just how useful it is. You can pay your utility bills or taxes, print official documents and government forms, buy concert and event tickets, ship or pick up parcels, and grab genuinely good coffee and desserts all in one place.
Oh, that'll coffee at a goddamn fucking convenience store is usually fucking like what, 80% dog shit, 20% okay. My mom has tried like the coffee or so and some of the convenience places, and my god, dude, My mom mostly is like, man, fuck this shit, man. This shit's dog shit.
Top of that, 7-Eleven Japan is constantly rolling out limited time and seasonal products, including exclusive drinks and sweets in collaboration with brands like Starbucks, along with its own sakura and strawberry dessert
That'll never happen, to be honest. That will literally never happen.
lines that never show up in US stores. Some 7-Eleven Japan stores are even officially designated as disaster support stations under Japan's National Disaster Response Framework. They're equipped with backup power, emergency supplies, and dedicated fuel and logistics resources so they can keep operating and help residents during earthquakes or blackouts.
Oh,
The company even
interesting.
offered temporary free Wi-Fi access during major disasters, helping people contact family and access emergency updates when networks are disrupted. Then there are the softer insights you only get from talking to locals. Did you know that 7-Eleven and other convenience stores have effectively privatized trash collection? In many Japanese cities, public trash cans were removed after the 1995 sarin gas attacks for security and public safety reasons.
That makes sense.
Which is why visitors are often shocked by how there are practically no trash cans on the street. In practice, that means if you need to throw something away, you just go into a convenience store like 7-Eleven and do exactly that, often even without buying anything, as locals do. From that perspective, 7-Eleven Japan has
That's
evolved into a
interesting.
kind of like de facto waste handling infrastructure and has become so embedded in everyday life that it's kind of hard to imagine the city functioning the same way without it. That being said, in tourist-heavy areas, there's now pushback. Some convenience stores put up signs saying trash cans are for items bought there only, partly because of overflowing rubbish from non-customers and confused tourists. The point is, this total integration of food, logistics, and daily services works because of the sophisticated system behind it. To understand that system and why Japanese 7-Eleven feels more like urban infrastructure than retail, we need to start with a map. Not of the whole country of Japan, and not even all of Tokyo, but of a single neighborhood. Here is the map of Shibuya, where within roughly a 1 kilometer or about 2/3 of a mile radius of Shibuya crossing alone, you can find more than 100 convenience stores. If you've ever visited Tokyo, you know this is true. There are multiple 7-Elevens and competitors like Family Mart and Lawson sometimes appearing on the same block. And with so many convenience stores packed so close together, you just can't help but wonder, do these places even have enough customers to make any profit at all? Herein lies the genius and innovation of 7-Eleven Japan, because what we now see was purely by design, driven by a unique business strategy that was the first of its kind in the convenience store world. When you're trying to expand the franchise brand and increase the number of stores, how'd you go about doing that? The natural inclination is to identify prime locations with a lot of foot traffic, more or less independently, right? Conquer new territory, extend the footprint, go after new cities and untapped markets. That makes sense, and to be fair, it's how a lot of franchises still expand today. But 7-Eleven Japan had a very different and deeply counterintuitive ideas. Instead of spreading stores thinly across the country, they implemented what is now referred to as an area dominant strategy, deliberately clustering 50 to 60 stores in a tightly defined area so that those outlets collectively gain economies of scale in distribution, brand recognition, and customer habit. In practice, that means tightening the radius between stores so that the brand can slash delivery costs, share sales and inventory information across nearby locations, and makes its logistics increasingly precise. Think about it. If your stores are close together, one delivery truck can make multiple stops in a single trip, delivering smaller batches to several outlets more often. This keeps shelves fresh without carrying excess stock. And that's a big reason why the average Japanese 7-Eleven is packed with an ever-changing lineup of ready-to-eat meals and freshly made items. But that's not all. Shorter delivery routes create faster feedback loops. What sells, what doesn't, what needs to be adjusted by the next morning. The information system that coordinates these deliveries, linking point-of-sale data from every register with supplier orders and real-time store forecasts, became the real secret sauce of Japanese 7-Eleven success. To give you a sense of
That
how
cannot be
sophisticated this machine
replicated
really
in
is,
America.
Japanese 7-Eleven doesn't just think in terms of products, it thinks in terms of time. Shelves aren't stocked the same way all day. Breakfast items go out in the morning. Lunch bento boxes peak around noon. Light meals and snacks rotated during the afternoon. Hot foods and comfort items show up late at night. In some stores, the same shelf space will hold completely different products 3 or 4 times in a single day. That's why the food feels so fresh even though space is limited. The store isn't even trying to sell everything to everyone at once. It's trying to sell the right thing to the right customer at the right hour. This time-based rotation also keeps waste low because products are designed.
Yeah, you can never do that in the US. Maybe you can do it in New York or packed cities in the US.
That constant rotation also allows.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Like a more compact, but even then, in New York City though, fuck no, dude. Sorry, not really throwing shade at New York, but like, you know, I heard a bunch of random shit in New York to begin with, you know? And then also on top of that, I don't know, like what other place would work? That's my curiosity.
Japanese 7-Elevens to carry fewer products than you might expect. Instead of endlessly adding more items and clustering the store, 7-Eleven Japan deliberately limits how many products each location carries at any given time. Fewer products means faster decisions for customers, simpler operations for staff, and much clearer data about what's actually selling. Over time, that discipline turns a store into something that feels curated rather than chaotic. You know, while we were doing our research, I couldn't help but notice that this area dominant strategy used by Japanese 7-Eleven looked oddly familiar. It reminded me of another company that tried to win through saturation and visibility. Starbucks. In the early 2000s, you couldn't walk 5 minutes in a major US city without passing the green siren logo. But as Starbucks expanded rapidly across the US and into China, the same strategy began to backfire. Sales per store dropped, and eventually Starbucks had to close hundreds of locations. So why didn't Starbucks' saturation model work as well as 7-Eleven Japan's cluster strategy? It comes down to what each company was built to optimize. Each Starbucks location was designed to deliver a full, self-contained cafe experience, which came with heavy fixed costs, large spaces, skilled labor, and high rent. Sure, Starbucks could capture some minor logistical efficiencies by shipping beans and pastries on shorter routes, but those savings were negligible compared to the massive in-store expenses, especially when nearby cafes started splitting the same customer pool. In other words, Starbucks' density created more overhead than opportunity. Each Japanese 7-Eleven, on the other hand, runs lean. Most stores are compact, employ only a few staff members, and plug directly into the same centralized logistics and data system. The closer the stores sit, the more those shared routes and distribution networks pay off. Deliveries get cheaper, and shelf restocking becomes faster. In short, for 7-Eleven, clustering compounds efficiency. For Starbucks, density only amplifies overhead. So hopefully by now, you understand how Japanese 7-Eleven manages to keep those egg sandwiches always so fresh and fully stocked. Like it's this living, learning supply chain disguised as a convenience store network. And now that 7-Eleven Japan is layering AI onto its data platform for things like product planning and store operations, its ability to predict what each neighborhood will want is getting sharper every year. Now comes the billion-dollar question. Could this Japanese version of 7-Eleven actually work in the US? And if there's a fighting chance?
No, I don't think it will if you're trying to copy it one-to-one, because you have to alternate it. You have to change it. You have to see what actually like works and what doesn't work. And the only thing is like you can only do it to some of the stores. You can't do it to all the stores. Because at the end of the day, you know, the US isn't a high trust society anymore. I'm like, for God's sakes, look what's happening, to be honest. So I don't think it would work out. Like, you can to like a degree, but you have to modify it so much or so. Because then you have to do like foods from America for it to work. You know, that's the only thing.
Hence, what would it take to make it work? Right now, the struggle is real for 7-Eleven Inc., the American 7-Eleven that by now you should recognize
true,
as
yeah.
the North American subsidiary of 7-Eleven Japan. Recent results show that growth in the US has fallen short of expectations, with the company citing inflation and weaker consumer demand for discretionary snacks and high-margin prepared foods. Unlike Japan, the US 7-Eleven business is also heavily dependent on gasoline sales, a reliance that grew even deeper after the $21 billion acquisition of Speedway, a major gas station chain, in 2021. This means US 7-Eleven earnings are now highly exposed to lower fuel margins and volatile oil prices.
That is true, actually.
So against that backdrop, efforts are underway for US stores to replicate the Japanese fresh food model. But that raises a more fundamental question. Is Japanese-style 7-Eleven clustering even possible in the United States? The kind of setup where a single delivery truck can loop through a dozen stores in one short run, all within
No, if it's one truck or so, no, it has to be a couple trucks. No, that's impossible. No, fuck no, dude. There's no way.
few miles. The short answer is not really. First of all, in the US, the convenience store didn't evolve as neighborhood infrastructure. It grew out of the gas station. It's a stop, not a destination. A place where you swing by while filling up, grabbing a soda, or buying a lottery ticket. Everything about the American convenience store format assumes customers arrive by car and only visit occasionally.
Yep, that is very
true. That car-centric geography shapes the entire...
There was a 7-Eleven that used to be part of a neighborhood. I think it's still there, but I'm not too sure. But like, the problem is, it's like it was easy to access it until they started building shit like around the area. It made it super difficult to get to it. It's, why would I say super difficult? It just got more annoying to get to. That's what it was.
Business model, because stores are spread far apart to capture drivers across wide suburban and rural areas. This means that deliveries have to be built around long routes and large drops.
Yep.
Core products like beverages and packaged goods are typically replenished on weekly cycles. And even fresh items move through regional distribution networks that often cover huge territories. Don't get me wrong, daily fresh deliveries do exist at many US 7-Elevens today.
They do?
In fact, a dedicated fresh food network now delivers to the vast majority of US and Canadian stores each day, with box trucks often making around a dozen or more stops on long overnight routes. In Japan, by contrast, chilled and warm foods can be delivered to the same store multiple times within a single day from nearby distribution centers. The difference is literally night and day. I suppose you can get closer to the Japanese model in a few dense pockets of the US, places like Midtown Manhattan or downtown Chicago. And 7-Eleven has experimented with more food-forward urban formats in those kinds of environments. But outside of these rare exceptions, the country's car-centric geography makes a level of logistical density exactly that, the exception, not the rule. Second, the competition landscape is completely different in Japan versus the United States. When you look at Japan's convenience store market from the outside, it looks like cutthroat competition. I mean, you've got 7-Eleven, Family Mart, and Lawson, three giants that together control over 90% of the market, often sitting within a few hundred meters of each other, sometimes even on the same block. But here's the twist that's not obvious to the public. Japan's convenience store competition isn't really a zero-sum game. Unlike in the US, where competitors treat each other like mortal enemies, Japan's big three behave as if they're building something together. To be clear, they absolutely compete and compete fiercely, racing to innovate with better food, cleaner stores, and faster checkouts, and friendlier service. But they also quietly cooperate to grow the convenience market as a whole. In Japan, competition doesn't destroy the market, it strengthens it. And part of this...
That's interesting. That is actually pretty interesting to hear, because that's not how it is usually in America or so, right? You usually when it's competing or so, it's because you're competing to one another to kind of like destroy your competition.
Cooperative balance comes from Japan's business culture. The principle of coexistence and co-prosperity runs deep, and 7-Eleven Japan explicitly uses that phrase to describe how it works with franchisees. The attitude extends beyond a single brand. When one competitor elevates the customer experience, the others usually follow. Everyone's reputation improves, and the whole category wins. From our research, we even uncovered an interesting detail. Former Lawson CEO Jenichi Tamatsuka and former Family Mart president Takashi Sawada both came out of the same corporate training ground at Fast Retailing, the company behind Uniqlo, where each held senior management roles before moving into convenience retail.
I heard of that one before.
Now, that does not mean they were colluding. That would be illegal. But it does mean they shared a common management culture and mindset, respected each other as rivals, and were focused on growing the industry as a whole. That mindset shows up in subtle but powerful ways. Shared distribution best practices, similar price points, and almost universal expectation of tidiness, reliability, and good manners. Basically, you'll never see Japan's convenience chains engaging in a price war by slashing prices or cutting corners. Now, contrast that with the United States, where competitors fight a fragmented zero-sum war. Every chain guards its turf, its data, its supply lines. And that's the key difference. In Japan, density builds synergy. In the US, density breeds conflict, which means the kind of coordinated learning loop that powers Japan's cluster strategy never even gets a chance to exist.
That's so interesting
But
to hear
if
that.
you thought the contrast in competition was stark, the gap in how franchise agreements work is even bigger. On the Japan side, the franchise contract is explicitly designed to bind each store into the wider system, not to leave it operating as a lone wolf. 7-Eleven Japan uses a simplified gross profit sharing model. Roughly 40+% of a store's gross profit is paid to headquarters as a royalty, often referred to as the 7-Eleven charge, and the remainder goes to the franchisee. On the US side, however, the entire system sits on a different foundation. Franchise and employment laws are built to protect local franchisees' independence, and culturally, operators see themselves as entrepreneurs first. Hey, I'm my own boss. I know this shop best, and HQ shouldn't micromanage me. That makes it extremely hard to roll out a Japanese-style agreement where headquarters tightly control pricing and or operations in exchange for deep profit sharing. You might get a few willing partners in a very specific urban markets, but doing that at scale across the US would be very hard. It would still be considered a franchise in legal terms, but it wouldn't feel like a typical American franchise relationship, and it would require far stronger upside for franchisees in exchange for giving up so much operational freedom. Can you see the pattern here? What's missing from much of the mainstream coverage of this debate is culture, and that cultural difference is reflected even in the labor model. In Japan, convenience stores are built around a large, flexible pool of part-time workers, students, retirees, and increasingly foreign workers from Southeast Asia, who are willing to work short shifts, follow standardized procedures, and rotate tasks throughout the day. Training is tightly structured, expectations are clear, and while turnover isn't low, it is predictable and manageable. That makes it far easier to run stores with frequent food preparation, constant shelf rotation, and late night or 24-hour operations without blowing up labor costs. In much of the US, by contrast, convenience stores operate in a far tighter labor market. Wages are higher, staff turnover is more unpredictable, and staffing shortages routinely force stores to reduce hours, limit food offerings, or shut down kitchens entirely. Even if you imported Japan's logistics, data systems, and menu, you'll still be trying to execute them with a labor model that is less flexible, more expensive, and far harder to standardize at scale. But to top all of this off, once you zoom out, there's this much broader pattern emerging that goes beyond franchise contracts and competition or even labor market. In Japan, the whole system is layered on top of a high-trust, high-compliance society. People tend to follow rules, public spaces are respected, and there's strong social pressure.
And that shit will never exist in the Western side. that shit will never exist in America. That shit will not be a thing that you will see in America.
Not to make trouble for everyone else. That environment makes it far easier to run 24-hour unmanned or lightly staffed stores, keeps aisles spotless and stock shelved with ready-to-eat items without constantly worrying about shoplifting, vandalism, or drug use in the bathroom. In much of the US, operators have to plan for security cameras, locked cases from theft, loitering, and sometimes serious safety issues as part of the basic operating reality. So even if we imported the Japanese system,
it wouldn't work.
You would still be dropping them into a society where trust in strangers is a lot lower. Social norms are...
Ah, man, dude. That's crazy. That's really crazy to hear about that, you know? You can't do it because one of the big issues is you guys are not a high trust society. Because literally you have to literally like, because all of this stuff is locked behind shit, so...
more flexible, to say the least, and the cost of guarding the store, both physically and psychologically, is significantly higher. I just want to make it clear. That does not make one country good and the other bad, but it does mean that the Japanese 7-Eleven model depends on a certain level.
No, I'll say it. It makes America look bad because you want to know the reason why? Because America is supposed to be a first world country, and the reason why they can't do it is because they're not trusted either. So that means America is not really one first world country at the end of the day. So
of public trust and order, then you cannot simply overcome with a better sandwich. In the end, it remains to be seen just how successful the American 7-Eleven's transition towards a more Japanese-style model will be. The upside is real. Better food, smarter logistics, and tighter use of data can absolutely make the U.S.
I just really don't think they can do fresh food at an American 7-Eleven. I just don't believe it. You know, there's no way they can do that. You know, it's impossible.
This chain more resilient. But for that to work, leadership will have to really take into account everything underneath the surface of Japan's 7-Eleven's success. The geography, the franchise incentives, the
fresh
competitive
non-processed
norms,
food,
and the level of social trust. It's also worth noting that even the Japanese 7-Eleven model is no longer running
it depends
on
the
mode.
partner with. But the problem is like when it comes to like fresh stuff in the US in general, they charge like way like expensively more compared to like a food that has preservatives in it, which is cheaper, you know, but it's more like unhealthy for you. That's the difference. Fresh, when it comes to like fresh shit in general and like fresh stuff in America, it's more expensive. It's like almost double, sometimes almost triple in price. That's what makes it the huge difference. Bro, just to shop at a Whole Foods, it's almost like you have to give up an organ. That's what I'm saying. And it's like there's just like literally no way for them to do it. They have to cut corners in order for them, or else they're not gonna make enough money to even call it profit.
As Japan's population shrinks and ages, the same profit-sharing structure that worked so beautifully is now increasingly leading to scenarios where headquarters can stay profitable while individual franchisees struggle with longer hours, rising labor costs, and thinner margins. Franchise groups and journalists in Japan have already highlighted hidden losses for store owners, fights over 24-hour operations, and cases where the fixed royalty formulas make it very difficult to keep up with rising costs. On top of that, Japanese customer expectations keep rising. People now want healthier options, digital payments, parcel pickup, and on-demand delivery, all from a tiny store that is supposed to be spotless, safe, and open late. That puts more pressure on staff, on systems, and on franchisees' already thin margins. Experiments with unmanned or semi-manned formats may ease labor pressure in some locations, sure, but they introduce new headaches around technology liability and the loss of the human convenient hospitality that made the format so beloved in the first place. So if there is a lesson here for American 7-Eleven, it's probably not that the US should try to become Japan's 7-Eleven. We can't. Japanese 7-Eleven didn't succeed by copy-pasting the American model. It succeeded by rebuilding the business from the ground up for Japan's own realities and constraints. And that may be exactly what the US operation needs to do now. Not by importing egg sandwiches or bento boxes, but by designing an American system that borrows a spirit of what worked in Japan. I'm talking about tight feedback loops, aligned incentives, and respect for both the neighborhood and competition, while being brutally honest about the constraints of US geography, labor and franchise laws, and culture. If American 7-Eleven can do that, it has a shot at becoming the best version of itself on its own terms, creating a genuine win.
Oh, yeah, totally. Like, that's gonna fucking work out. I have more trust. I literally have more trust of my Japanese konbini store being more successful than that shit, to be frankly honest, than an American 7-Eleven.
For customers, franchisees, and the brand at the same time. If you found this video insightful and felt like you learned something new,
This was
be
actually
sure
very
to subscribe
interesting,
to
to be
Asian
honest.
Vods and let us know in the comments which part you agree or disagree with. By the way, don't forget to click on the link in the description to get
Like, he makes sense. Specifically, if you look at everything, it does actually, like, you're just like, yeah.
and on the internet for only $2 a month. So check it out. You know, it's not easy to do all this deep research, especially because we're not franchise law or convenience industry experts. But that's exactly why we try to interview locals as much as we can and take our fact-checking seriously. That's also why sharing this video and engaging with our content really matters. Because the more support we get, the more we are able to go out there and do even deeper, more thorough research.
This is pretty cool, to be honest.
Speaking
I like
of
this.
more engagement, I just want to hear from you. Not just through comments. I actually want to talk to you and ask questions. So I'm just going to throw out a topic because I'm genuinely curious about this. Japan has this infamous salaryman culture where everyone works crazy hours and goes drinking afterwards, right? At least that's the stereotype.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that culture is changing or has already changed. So if you have any experience working in Japan, even as a foreigner or student, I want to hear from you. We are selectively inviting a small group of people to take part in a live stream discussion. If you feel comfortable showing your
not bad.
face and speaking English,
Yeah,
and
that
you
is
have
true. You
relevant
can't copy the JP growth strategy because it ain't geographically possible. Summary of the VOD: US 7-Eleven will never be on JP level. It's impossible. There's no way it can copy the same thing as Japan 7-Eleven, to be frankly honest. It is literally like, especially because, like, I know, because they make fresh food. I know this for a fact. I fucking know this because I've done my own research a long time ago or so, what of 7-Eleven Japan, the differences with that, and the one with ours specifically, of course, you know. But even then, like, I have I have Japanese konbini stores, and I have other specific marketplaces too, like other markets that also do the same exact thing that they have. They have like Japanese stuff, Korean stuff, Chinese stuff. They have Italian, but it's like a supermarket, so that makes it the whole difference. But it's also like it has its own, like, it kind of has it like in a almost like in a makeshift way of like the Asian aestheticness to it, where everything is like nice and pretty much fresh in general. And then I think 2 to 3, maybe 4 places that I have here. There might be more or so, but these are the only ones that I know specifically. Where there is one that's like is a konbini store, and is also at the same time it's also like a restaurant where you can order food. So it's a combination of two together, where it's like there's like a few couple tables here, and then you can order food, and then it's also a konbini store where you can buy and shop stuff, and then right where you sit down and like eat some stuff, there's also like in that specific area, like a little bit more back or so, you can buy stuff that's literally like comes imported from Japan itself. So there's that as well. The other shop is literally like straight up, no joke. I'll try to see if I can find pictures of it so I can show you guys at least. But it's literally just straight up like literally like a convenience store. Everything is organized. You can buy the stuff back here. You can buy the fresh food there because it's made daily. The food is actually made daily. So that's why for them specifically it works for them. And I think there might be a couple stores of those. That just makes it the difference. Like, I guess like where we live is a lot more better, for this to work, but like I know for a fact in America it will never, this will never work because everything is so far away. It's the same thing here too. There's a lot of things that are far away too as well. But then from time to time you'll have like a gas station or so, like within like the general region of like houses and stuff like that. Like for us, there's like one down the street for us. Actually, there's like no, there's one. I thought there was more than one, but no, it's just one. Yeah, it's just one specifically near our neighborhood, and that's kind of like basically why all the other ones are kind of like more farther away. And it makes sense too that theirs in America is mostly tailored towards gas. But I know that the gas is super expensive over there, so it also kind of hurts them a little bit more. That's probably why they're losing money specifically, because like well, because other competitors would probably be lowering their prices to make it better deals instead of going to 7-Eleven and buying gas from them, because I assume it's probably expensive. Well, I know in California it's a lot more expensive, but I'm just taking a shot in a dart for that. And then also at the same time, like, I don't think the food is that crazy good in 7-Eleven. At least not to my knowledge. But overall, this is pretty cool. I like this though. This was a cool video. I just wanted to talk to a little bit something different at the end of the day. But anyways, that's the end of the video. And we can go on further talking about this, of course, but I'm just gonna end it there. And yeah, cool channel. Like the channel so far. I really like it. Cool conversation. And peace.